This is The Great Outdoors with Jason White, exploring the great outdoors in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsmen Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, The Great Outdoors with Jason White.
Hello, friends. I'm Jason White. Welcome to The Great Outdoors. It is a nice, cool day here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and I have an awesome show for you. I have a tremendous guest lined up today, but before I jump into the topics of discussion, I want to give a special thanks to our sponsors, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. You can join the MOA today at marianaoutdoors.com. Again, marianaoutdoors.com. 2.5 miles of private trophy trout fishing. 1,000-yard rifle range, largest in southwestern Pennsylvania, and to my understanding, within at least 3 to 5 hour drive. 400 acres of upland bird hunting, and much, much, much more. Check us out at marianaoutdoors.com or give us a call at 724-579-0924 if you'd like to book a fishing trip, or if you're interested in a tour, or if you're interested in coming out and just checking out the place. We would absolutely love to have you. Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. If you're looking to book a deer hunt, turkey hunt, upland bird hunt, which is pheasant, quail, chucker, or if you're interested in a fishing trip, which all of these are completely no fence. Everything's free ranging. Deer and turkey are under Pennsylvania normal hunting seasons. Lodging available. Tremendous guides, tremendous amenities. We'd love to have you come stay at our Civil War era farmhouse. Can't speak highly enough. Managed and operated by 10 Mile Creek Outfitters. You can get more information at 10mileco.org. Again, TENMILECO.org. And you can also give us a call for more information about guided hunts and fishing trips. 724-579-0924. Just some quick updates about the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Have some upcoming events, and actually this is just a calendar of events for the future as a whole. There's an Energy and Sportsman's Bash this Saturday. It's March 29th. It'll be at 19 North Event Venue in Washington, PA. All this information is on the MOA's website, marianaoutdoors.com, and also Mariana Outdoorsman Association at Facebook. But that is a Energy and Sportsman's Bash. That's a combined effort with the American Oil and Gas Alliance and the Mariana Outdoorsman Association, highlighting the positive and symbiotic relationship with the great outdoors and our folks working in energy that provide us with, obviously heat, air, energy, and everything in between to get this country rolling in a positive direction. There's a trout stalking scheduled for April the 3rd at 3 p.m., a trout stalking scheduled for Thursday, May the 1st at 3 p.m., and then the PA Trout Classic, which is a 2.5-day trout tournament, which will have people from different states coming to Washington County, PA, for an amazing, fun-filled time. Certainly love to have you. And then last but not least, on the schedule, June the 14th, is the annual golf outing at Chippewa Golf Course in Washington County, PA. That being said, again, thanks to all of our sponsors. But today, we are going to dive into discussions about regulatory reform stemming from Pennsylvania to across the country. And there's an amazing event that's taking place tomorrow regarding this. And my guest today is Emily Greene. She's with Americans for Prosperity of Pennsylvania. Thanks for coming on today, Emily.
Hey, Jason. It's so good to be here. Good morning.
Well, thank you, and thanks again for participating today. If you don't mind, tell people about yourself, about AFP, what you all do, and and then we can talk a little bit, obviously, about regulatory reform and the issues that are kind of really pressing today in Pennsylvania and I would say across the country.
Well, certainly. And my name is Emily Greene. I serve as State Director with Americans for Prosperity Pennsylvania, which is the Commonwealth's largest full-time grassroots infrastructure. We are one of 37 state chapters across the country. And Jason, we have this radical idea that the taxpayers in Pennsylvania can spend their money better than the government can. It's crazy that that's a radical idea in today's political world, but it really is. And I'm I'm so elated to talk with you about regulatory reform because this is an issue that has, renewed enthusiasm. I think with this new administration, we're seeing regulatory reform become a household topic across all 50 states, and there's a lot of opportunity here in Pennsylvania. So regulatory reform is one of the many issues that Americans for Prosperity works to tackle. And we certainly have job security here in Pennsylvania because certainly we are a very heavily regulated, very taxed state. So we are working to provide voices to the grassroots, connect them with their decision makers in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C., and make sure that we make Pennsylvania a freer and more prosperous place to live.
Well, are there that all sounds wonderful to me. I know that I've been working with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, and we certainly would like to see a lot of changes when it comes to permitting reform in Pennsylvania. And I know for anybody out there, actually tomorrow, Thursday the 27th, there's going to be an event at the Meadows Casino in Washington County, Pennsylvania. Americans for Prosperity is actually hosting this event, but it's a panel discussion to really dive into permitting reform in PA. And I think it's extremely imperative to talk about, Emily, because I've been such an advocate about the Chapter 105, which is the general permits. And they're basically, I tell everybody, it's kind of like, think of it like the foundation of your house. And if your foundation is weak or cracked or not structurally sound, everything else collapses. If you can, I guess kind of highlight, where do you see where we are as far as, I know the governor's been talking about certain things. I know my opinion on this, but kind of give an update from a state perspective, because obviously you're across the whole state of PA. Where do you see where we're at? Where do you think we need to go? And kind of just bring everybody up to speed on permitting in Pennsylvania.
Sure, absolutely. And, permitting reform is something that can either make or break a state, because with the permitting barriers that we see in Pennsylvania, this holds small businesses back. This holds Main Street back, and it holds Pennsylvanians back from living their version of the American dream. I know you can certainly speak more eloquently to Chapter 105, but when it comes to permitting generally, Americans for Prosperity has been a very vocal supporter of permitting reform across the Commonwealth for the 15 years of existence, where we've been, working with the grassroots to connect them with their decision makers in Harrisburg. So permitting reform, we've heard our governor say, hey, we want to make Pennsylvania, he's competitive as hell. We want to make Pennsylvania competitive. But that is certainly not where we are at as a Commonwealth right now. We are losing our population to greener pastures, such as West Virginia and Ohio, which I know where you're calling in from right now is you're right on the border there. I think about my friends and family, and when they think about their economic futures, they're not thinking about investing in Pennsylvania. They're thinking of moving to greener pastures like Florida, like North Carolina, who have states that have really embraced permitting reform, who have embraced regulatory reform more generally. And as a result, they're receiving our population. I mean, we are losing representation in Washington. We are losing congressional districts because we can't seem to incentivize people to stay in Pennsylvania. So that's why, we are strong supporters of legislation that would speed up the permitting process so people can have permits in hand much quicker. And when I think about a story, when I think about permitting reform, I think of a story from Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill in York County, who has been such a strong champion of permit transparency, regulatory reform. And she shared with me her why she champions these bills in Harrisburg. She said, I have a constituent who's in the business of building hotels, and it would be cheaper and quicker for him to pack up, move to Maryland or West Virginia, build a property, get everything up and running, and then do the ribbon cutting. It's quicker for him to do that than it is to receive a permit in Pennsylvania. And to me, that is just, it's startling, first and foremost, and also really speaks to why this needs to be an issue that we address quickly. So Senator Kristen Phillips Hill, a champion in the state Senate, has reintroduced comprehensive regulatory reform, which includes permit transparency, which includes regulatory reform that will help us foster a better climate for people to live their version of the American dream.
Well, some of the things that I know that have been presented recently by, I'll just say from the governor. I know one of them was about giving applicants their fees back if a permit wasn't received in a timely manner. I know that I've gotten feedback on that, and I don't know, I'm not sure if there's even one example where that's legitimately actually happened, where the fees have been returned, number one. Number two, I would argue, based upon the fee schedule as a whole, if you really look at the fees, I would love to know how anybody even calculate any of that to figure it out. I think they're completely ridiculous. How do we quantify, your nickel and diming people? In some capacities, it's a lot of money for some of these fee applications. So I think that, that is something that absolutely needs overhauled with the fees up front. The other thing is, there was this unveiling of this, I'm going to call it the quote-unquote speed program that they've labeled it. I don't know if that's actually the official title of it, but this concept to hire consultants to review these larger scale permits under Chapter 102. I think the governor thinks it's a good idea. I personally, I've talked to different consulting companies and engineering firms, and to me, number one, makes the government bigger. It's going to add more fees for people. And number three, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get your permit back in a timely manner in the first place. So when you look at both of the things that have been proposed, they seem to be either not working, or they're almost like a bureaucracy way of trying to fix the bureaucracy, which is, you understand what I mean. Typically when the snowball goes down the hill, it gets bigger instead of getting smaller. So, I'm very concerned that those are our government's perceived solutions from the executive branch, because I do not see them currently working. I just kind of wanted your take. Like, what are you hearing about those two ideas? And is the legislature, wanting to do anything about either of them as well?
I'm so glad you brought up the point about the governor's efforts to reimburse the fees for permits that aren't granted. I mean, look, we are a grassroots organization at our core, and we talk with thousands of just concerned business owners, activists every single day. And what they're saying, what we're hearing is, well, that's great, but I want the permit. I want to be able to build. I want to create my American dream for my business, for my family. So sure, it's great that they might get reimbursement, but they want the permits. They want to create. And so I'm so glad you brought up that point. And, with respect to the governor's speed program, we are supportive of regulatory reform efforts, of course. But we know how quickly political climates change. And while, Governor Shapiro is saying that he supports regulatory reform, we could have a new administration within the next 4 to 8 years, and then all of that good work is for nothing. So, our perspective is that we need regulatory reform through the legislative branch. That is what is most important here, because Pennsylvanians deserve it. In order to create a better climate for businesses, for taxpayers, we need real regulatory reform that puts the power in your voice in Harrisburg, not the executive branch.
Well, I wanted to, and I think that's 1,000,000% correct, because the problems that exist are the fees, the timing, the timeliness of it. Now they're wanting to actually expand the fees and to bring in these consultants. There's no deadlines on things being reviewed. And I think I go back to the foundation of the House. And that's why I focused myself personally and professionally to learn so much about the Chapter 105 program. For any listeners out there, the state gets its authority from the Clean Water Act federally, and it basically gets delegated down from the Army Corps of Engineers, which the DEP is the Pennsylvania, I'll just call it, department that oversees these environmental activities in Pennsylvania. So to Emily's point, the governor and the executive branch basically has the authority to fix or to manage these programs. Again, to Emily's point, there's been a huge dropping of the ball, and the necessary things to protect Pennsylvania and to move Pennsylvania forward in a positive way just has not happened. And I wanted to give you this example, Emily. So, and I'm going to go over this again tomorrow. So I've been working on a general permit number 1. That's a fish habitat enhancement. So I'm improving the environment, right? Doing something as basic, it's called boulder placement. I've been working on this permit now for 3 weeks. I wanted to give you this because I have I've been logging it for you. I've been working on this on and off for 3 weeks. Total allocated time on my end has been 12 hours, and that's, a half hour here, 15 minutes here, 4 hours yesterday. 3 weeks, 12 hours allocated, and the application currently is 28 pages long. I just emailed it yesterday to the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Once I get approval from them, then I have to print off everything, including their letter, so that'll be 29 pages. I then have to print 2 copies, so now we're up to, 58 pages. I will take all of that to the County Conservation District with 2 checks, one payable to the Conservation District for an E&S review, and another check to the department for, I think it's clean water or something. There's a fund that they have. But at the end of the day, the application on my end for a general permit 1, the simplest permit of all, is going to be approximately 58 pages with 2 checks attached. And by that time, I will probably be surpassing, by the time of travel and going where I need to go, I'm going to be around 15 plus hours allocated to this, not to mention the time I've been working on it, and now we're into review time. We'll see. But I already got 3 weeks into it, compiling it. Now, yesterday was basically day number 1 or day 0 for the submission. So I just wanted to share that with you because, to look at this, I see so many functional issues and people permitting such a big topic. And when you look at it from the simplest of the simple things of, to me, if we can't do something as basic as trying to improve the environment, how can we ever expect big business to be able to flourish in Pennsylvania?
Wow. I mean, that is just startling. And I am certain that you would probably not see that many regulatory barriers if you were to look to do this in another state. Certainly our neighboring states are benefiting from the fact that we are regulating people out of house and home. There is a study from the Mercatus Center that shows that Pennsylvania is the 14th most regulated state in the United States. And what that does is, more regulations correlate with increased poverty rates, lost jobs, higher inflation. And, when we think about the governor saying that he's competitive as hell, he wants us to compete with other states, increased poverty rates doesn't really seem like that's making us more competitive, does it?
No, not at all. And I would be interested to know, I guess not to really get into major partisan issues, but is 1 through 13, are those blue states, red states? Is it a mixture? Do you know that by chance?
Well, I will tell you, number 1 is California, and number 2 is New York. Number 3 is New Jersey. So those are not typically states that I would want Pennsylvania to keep in good company, right?
Wow.
But, yes, exactly. So it's more regulation leads to poor economic outcomes. And we as a state just cannot afford that, particularly after coming off of 4 years of record high inflation. Our economy is just starting to stabilize, and we just can't afford to add more regulatory barriers, more permitting barriers to our small businesses who are just fighting to survive.
Well, another thing I wanted to share with you, a firsthand experience. So as part of doing a permit application, you have to do what's called an aquatic impact table. It's an Excel spreadsheet you have to fill out basically on if you're in a waterway, what your impacts are going to be. Well, I went back and forth with my engineering company about this, and they actually weren't sure what perceived number the DEP was looking for. So I reached out to the local conservation district, and it's not an insult to anybody. It's just the cold hard facts. I spoke to somebody on the phone, and the person that was going to review my permit application said, "I've never reviewed one of these before, and I'm not really sure what to tell you." And I was like, it was a very I would say enlightening conversation, because I can tell the listeners out there. The folks that are reviewing the permits do not have, in my professional opinion, the knowledge and expertise to even know what they're reviewing. And I think that is damning for the state. To Emily's point about people wanting to go other places, I think legislatively there certainly needs to be things built into the legislation that if somebody's going to be reviewing a permit, they better have the credentials, knowledge, and I would even say accountability. To me, there's no checks and balances here. You basically have bureaucrats gone wild, and I think, for me personally, I'm here trying to improve the environment, and the things that I've watched the DEP do in Pennsylvania, or for example, like I could take somebody to Marianna, Pennsylvania, where we used to have the largest canoe race in the state. Trying to build up a small town. PennDOT does illegal activity, replacing a roadway, destroys a stream and waterway. Guess what? DEP doesn't hold them accountable. So then you run into the accountability side of it, the discriminatory side of it, that basically DEP wants to interpret things and create their own rules or how they're going to enforce their buddies and pals, but the same standards do not exist for the private sector. That to me is a problem. Same thing goes with these reviews. When you don't have qualified people, when there's not, I think we're in I really believe in my heart here, based upon the facts of the situation, we're into a constitutional situation here. The fact that region to region we've now documented that permitting is being done differently, that's a discriminatory practice. I really believe that is a constitutional matter. I think that that's another reason that legislation needs to be enacted. How there haven't been more, I don't know how to say it other than saying, I don't know how there haven't been more lawsuits against the state for, predatory practices and discriminatory practices, because, you could have an approved permit in one region, but another region in DEP interprets something completely different just because of staff. I see all of this happening, and to your point, one would hope that they would have just done the right thing, but I think the only way this is really going to be protected for the people of Pennsylvania is that legislation is enacted. So now, when you add this all up, Emily, you're talking, the fees up front. You're talking about who's reviewing, what are the qualifications, and my big argument with the general permits in Chapter 105 is that when we talk about timeliness or timing, and I know I've talked about this to the listeners out there that have heard me before, the Chapter 105s are the foundation of the house. That's how I always, talk about it. But when you do a Chapter 105 today, and you do the foundation of the house today, you have to start off with a PNDI application, which is actually an environmental mapping system that's through it's through the DCNR. So you're doing permitting right now. People have to do permitting, and DCNR is involved. And then from there, then it pings into all the other agencies. And by the time it's all said and done, it's not a one-stop shop. It can take 30 days is like a short period of time, and that's not going to happen, because what should happen is we need a legislative process to where they are mandated and required to have a notice of intent program that somebody could go onto a GIS mapping system, fill out their application, pick from. And the reason I wanted to say this, Emily, the reason I had to involve an engineer, because none of the maps are available. So like the maps that they required with like quadrants off of longitude latitude maps, like you have to get an engineer to get that stuff. It's not just openly available. So like exactly, if you had a GIS program to where somebody could click on a map, say, hey, I want to put a stream crossing in for cattle at my farm, I should be able to click right on a map where I'm going to do it. It should already, all this stuff should automatically populate into a system. And when it's all said and done, you pick your drawing that they should provide. They should provide ample opportunities. So again, another example to you, I was doing boulder placement. Well, the drawings, there's only one drawing provided by the Fish and Boat Commission. That's it. That you get one drawing to pick from. Well, it doesn't remotely cover all the different applications. Like there should be probably 10 to 20 different options just for that one idea. Same thing for a farmer with a cattle crossing. Same thing for all the other things that fall underneath the general operating procedures. We could simplify this so much by bringing in knowledgeable people in advance, putting this all in a one-stop shop, and when you hit submit at the end of the day, your fees, I shouldn't have to go hand 2 hard copies of the County Conservation District. I shouldn't have to write checks. I should be able to pay if I want to with a credit card and pay my fees. Boom, it automatically send it out to all the agencies. People can, I mean, I'm not advocating to take away anybody's ability to go inspect it, but to everything we're talking about here, we can't even get to that point. People want to be able to build. Mm-hmm. And
God.
So it's just, there's so many gaps, there's so many cracks in the foundation, and I think that's why I've been so passionate about this, because I've done permitting with a coal company. I've done permits that were hundreds of pages thick. And to see something that we want to do, environmental improvements to make the world better, the DEP, I thought the government was supposed to be there as a good thing and something to be uplifting to make things better. And what I thought was to give hope, in my opinion now, is just it's sucking hope and taking hope away from people. And that's really sad to me. And I think that's truly why I'm so passionate about this particular topic.
Absolutely. I mean, well, to your point, what is the famous Ronald Reagan quote? The scariest words in the English dictionary are, I'm with the government and I'm here to help. I'm paraphrasing that, but it truly, and your story is shocking, and it's not uncommon, unfortunately. We have a runaway administrative state, both in Washington and in Harrisburg. And the U.S. Constitution, it establishes 3 distinct branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. But somehow we now have a 4th branch of government, which is the administrative state. And there's legislation that can be enacted to make sure that we are reigning in the administrative state, both in Washington and in Harrisburg. So, I know we said at the top of this call, this is the year for a renewed enthusiasm for regulatory reform. And at Americans for Prosperity, both in D.C. and both in Harrisburg, we are supporting legislation called the REINS Act. What does REINS stand for? Regulations from the executive in need of scrutiny. This exists to rein in the administrative state to make sure that there's more legislative oversight over new regulations that impose a huge fiscal burden on the taxpayers. So in Washington, we have Congresswoman Kat Kamak from Florida who is championing this, and we have legislators in Harrisburg this year, both in the House and Senate, who are working to make this a reality. But obviously this has a lot of barriers to success. There's not a lot of enthusiasm for it in the House right now, just given the composition. But what this would do is ensure that any new regulatory barrier or regulatory burden that costs over $1 million must go through the legislature in Harrisburg, giving us as taxpayers more of a voice. So we are just so grateful to Senator Don Kiefer, who's championing this in the Senate, and Representative Dallas Kephart, who's working this in the House. But think about all of the regulatory barriers to energy abundance, particularly on your side of the Commonwealth. That has a major, major economic impact on taxpayers and ratepayers. And these are protections that we can put in place and just ensure that there's greater oversight from the legislature. And we uphold the three branches of government and not create a fourth.
Well, I certainly feel right now, based on what I've seen, there's a complete and utter lack of accountability with the bureaucracy of that, what I would brand the fourth branch, to your point. And, you know, we live in a representative republic, and I just feel there's a giant disconnect. There's a huge lack of oversight. And something I also want to highlight here, if we really went and looked at it, Emily, again, this isn't being insulting towards anybody, but a lot of these hierarchies within these agencies are political appointments. Are these people truly qualified for the agencies they represent? Are they truly for the people's best interest? Do they truly understand the programs that exist? Do they truly understand solutions to fix problems? And, you know, in saying all that, what I've seen and witnessed, you know, I've seen certain secretaries getting grilled here recently about environmental issues and couldn't, you know, were fumbling and bumbling and weren't sure of answers. I really feel like, you know, when questions are asked, especially in positions of such magnitude, I feel you really need really deep roots and strong knowledge base. And I just really question deep down that there's people in leadership positions within the bureaucracy that truly have Pennsylvania's best interest and more so just holding on or latching on to that bureaucratic power. But, you know, that's me kind of being on my stump or soapbox about it. But, you know, just from what I've seen, I'm not sure we have the knowledge in the right places. You know, that's a concerning fact to me personally.
And you know, certainly taxpayers deserve to have a greater voice in these decisions being made in Harrisburg and Washington. And that's why RAINS is so important. The RAINS Act is just critical because, yes, there is a lot of bureaucratic red tape and regulations that our members of the legislature never voted on. And so, you know, and this is impacting the lives of taxpayers, and their representation in Harrisburg has never voted on it. To me, that's just unacceptable. Like we need to have a greater voice, and the General Assembly needs to have a greater voice in some of these decisions. And you know, the RAINS Act is something that is really not controversial at all. There's a lot of it's very popular in the sense that we are reinforcing taxpayers' voices. And this has passed in multiple states, particularly in states not dissimilar to ours, like Wisconsin. You know, we have launched a major campaign at Americans for Prosperity. We have over 20 states that are working to pass the RAINS Act right now, while in Washington we're working on the federal bill to get this done as well. Look, this can be done in a divided government. This can be done with governors who don't necessarily support it. This can be passed, and if you're listening here, if you want to learn more about common sense regulatory reform, head to AmericansForProsperity.org. Sign your name to our petition that shares that you support the RAINS Act. That will go right to your member of the state legislature and really reinforce that if they are to share their voice with leadership, that they support this, like you've got their back. That's the beauty and the power of the grassroots. We're giving activists across all 67 counties a voice. So head to AmericansForProsperity.org to learn more.
Emily, is there, I wanted to ask you, the RAINS Act, is there a bill number on that, or is it where is that actually at federally right now, and even within the state, or where like are these things in committees, or where's this all at?
Yep, absolutely. So in the House, it has not yet been introduced, but the bill sponsor will be getting that up and running here shortly. It's been a slow start to the legislative session in Harrisburg.
Yes.
Senate Bill 333, the REINS Act, championed by Senator Don Kiefer, has been introduced. We are working to get this through committee to a vote. And in Washington, it's a little bit more complex. But as you may remember, a few weeks back, House Republicans passed a budget resolution that includes the REINS Act, that includes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension, which I'd love to chat with you more about if there's time,
Sure.
to kind of start the pathway to get the REINS Act to a final vote. So Congress is a little wonky with their processes, but it's on the move. It's happening. So we are just encouraging members of Congress as well as the state General Assembly to make this happen, to talk about it, to talk with their leadership about this, because this is common sense. It enjoys bipartisan support and can get done in divided government.
What do you perceive at the state level now that the House and Senate are still split, with the House being Democrat, the Senate being Republican, and obviously with a Democrat governor? I know last year I had dealt with this particular issue in regards to Senate Bill 67. There were some changes with it's happening again this year with Senate Bill 67. It's being introduced, but I think it's extremely critical when we talk about giving qualified representation on some of these boards, committees, commissions, which is part of what that bill does, and then it does a lot of other things. But the moral of the story was last year when the bill was coming forth, I came to find out after the fact that, basically the Republicans were pushing the bill, and then when it got to the House Democrats were basically wanting $20 an hour as a trade to even bring the bill to the floor to vote. With that being said, knowing that, do you see any barriers? Do you see any landmines, I guess, that are going to rear its head in regards to this Senate Bill 333 with the current lay of the land in Pennsylvania politically?
Well, Jason, I oftentimes find that my crystal ball is broken. So I think we shall wait and see. We know a budget is due in June. We know that that's kind of the crescendo of the legislative process at work. We see a lot of negotiations being made. Negotiations are good, particularly in divided government, because we need to work together to get good legislation passed and deliver for the people of Pennsylvania. But I will say we remain committed to the REINS Act. We know that this is common sense. We certainly encourage all members, both Democrat and Republican, to talk with their leadership about bringing this to a vote. This is something that we just can't afford to waste any time on. We need to get this done. There are so many states that are taking very swift action to get this done. Our neighboring states, for example, like Ohio and West Virginia, are close to getting this done. And we're going to continue to lose our population if we don't promote and pass good regulatory reform. And, given Governor Josh Shapiro's posture towards regulatory reform, we would love to see this get done through the legislature, through codifying this through the legislative branch. So we remain cautiously optimistic, Jason.
Well, certainly, again, anybody that would like to hear more about regulatory reform tomorrow, would you like to, I guess we can end on that. We still have a few minutes, but would you like to explain to folks like what we're doing tomorrow and like the importance of it, and just explain like how you all put on these panels to like inform folks like from a grassroots perspective?
Absolutely. Well, we are so excited for tomorrow's legislative panel on regulatory reform. So if you're hearing anything about reg reform, DOGE, what have you, regulatory reform is in the news. It is in the headlines. But there's also a lot that is that falls within regulatory reform. So we're bringing together a panel of experts. We have Republican Whip Representative Tim O'Neill as the featured guest. And we have, like I said, a panel of experts to really talk about the impact of regulatory reform, what this would mean for Pennsylvanians, because we know there's a lot that encompasses regulatory reform, and education is key. Education is power, because you can then take that knowledge to your member of the General Assembly or to your member of Congress and say, we want to see this done in short order. So join us tomorrow. We are going to be at the Hollywood Casino at the Meadows. Happy hour begins at 5 p.m. and the panel runs from 6 to 7:15. We'll have a networking reception afterwards. But like I said, we are going to feature Republican Whip Representative Tim O'Neill. We are so excited to have him. Chris Hoffman, president of the PA Farm Bureau, will be the esteemed moderator tomorrow night. And we are going to have guests from Pioga, environmental and regulatory law specialists, and our host for this radio show, Jason White, Farm Bureau Wildlife and Fisheries Committee and owner of 10 Mile Creek Outfitters. You can ask them any questions, learn more, so that we can make regulatory reform in Pennsylvania a reality. So if you're interested in joining, reach out to our fabulous coalitions director, Mary Beth Cerrucci. You can shoot her a message at 412-302-5832. Again, that's 412-302-5832 to secure your spot. So we hope to see you tomorrow night.
Well, thank you, Emily, and certainly I'm very thankful and appreciative that not only AFP, but you personally and professionally are so passionate about regulatory reform. I truly believe it's absolutely an anchor to Pennsylvania, and I certainly appreciate any politician, even the governor, being willing to at least talk about it. But talking about it only goes so far. It's time that we act. It's time that we actually make positive impacts. It's time that we collectively, despite your party affiliation, it's time that everybody come together and understand that we truly need to implement legislative solutions here to our problems, because we cannot allow unelected bureaucrats to continue to stymie progress in Pennsylvania. And I just want to reiterate, I'm an avid conservationist, an outdoorsman, a sportsman, business person in general. I come from the mining industry. I in no way, shape, or form would ever want to do anything detrimental to the environment. This has nothing to do with that. I'm actually trying to do things to improve the environment. But at the end of the day, if the government is so bureaucratic and so much red tape, as the political saying goes, none of us collectively can move forward. So, if you want to hear about these particular topics, if you want to ask any questions, heck, I'm sure there's going to be opportunity tomorrow for people to even convey their own stories. We will be in Washington County at the casino, the Meadows Casino. We'll basically be there from 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock. But Emily, thank you so much. I look forward to future conversations with you. I'm sure there's going to be other opportunities for us to do this again. But again, thank you so much. And for the listeners out there, I'm Jason White. This is Great Outdoors, and we will talk to you next week.